What if I told you the most functional cities in the world weren't built by architects or planners, but grew on their own, almost by accident? Some cities just evolved, and somehow ended up working even better than the ones that were carefully designed. We've been told that the best cities are carefully planned, streets mapped in grids, districts divided by logic, and infrastructure optimized by professionals. But what if that idea is wrong? Because in some parts of the world, cities that grew on their own through trial, error, and centuries of messy evolution have somehow ended up working better than the ones that were meticulously designed. These aren't utopian experiments or futuristic eco-projects. They're self-organizing spaces that prove humans don't always need a plan to create brilliance. So today, we're diving into 4 cities that shouldn't work, but do. Cities that defy logic, planning, and even physics, yet function like clockwork. If you dropped an architect into Tokyo for the first time, they would probably panic. Because at first glance, Tokyo looks like a total mess. No consistent street grid, buildings of every height and era jammed next to one another, tiny alleyways squeezed between skyscrapers, electric wires crisscross the skyline like spiderwebs. Entire neighborhoods look like they were drawn by different people, because they were, and yet somehow it works. Tokyo is one of the most efficient, clean, and safest megacities on Earth. Trains arrive on the second, streets are spotless. Despite having over 37 million people in its metropolitan area, the largest urban population in the world runs smoother than most smaller planned cities. To understand Tokyo, you have to understand its chaotic evolution. The city wasn't built in one era. It's a patchwork of centuries. Earthquakes, fires, and wars repeatedly wiped parts of it out, forcing constant rebuilding. And instead of enforcing rigid planning rules, Tokyo's approach was to adapt. If one area burned down, people rebuilt it differently. It was an organic process of trial and error. Unlike Western cities that imposed order from the top down, Tokyo grew from the bottom up. Every small district developed its own character, layout, and function. Over time, these micro-neighborhoods connected like puzzle pieces, forming a chaotic but living mosaic. And yet, beneath the apparent chaos, there's an invisible order. Tokyo doesn't have a grand grid, but it has hyper-functional systems with trains and subways that connect every neighborhood. Local zoning laws are flexible, allowing homes, cafes, offices, and shops to coexist on the same street. And instead of big centralized urban decisions, thousands of small ones shape the city daily. That's Tokyo's secret: decentralized design. It's a city that trusts people to organize themselves, and they do. In fact, it's often said that Japan doesn't need strict planning because its culture naturally respects order, cleanliness, and coexistence. So even when the physical layout looks chaotic, the social behavior holds everything together. Tokyo also embraces density instead of fearing it. Where Western cities sprawl outward, Tokyo builds upward and inward. You can walk from a quiet shrine to a neon-lit arcade in under 5 minutes, and it never feels disconnected. Everything is within reach, and every inch of land has purpose. Tokyo's adaptability also stems from its human scale. Streets aren't designed for cars, but for pedestrians, cyclists, and small businesses. The narrow alleys that seem chaotic on a map actually foster intimacy and connection. Every corner offers a discovery: a pocket garden, a vending machine cluster, a ramen counter with room for 6. These microspaces keep life visible and accessible. And then there's Tokyo's quiet choreography. Despite the density, there's harmony and movement as trains glide, crowds flow like water, and convenience stores operate as if guided by invisible logic. What looks accidental is actually the result of countless local optimizations made daily by ordinary citizens. Tokyo didn't need a master plan to function. It needed trust in people, in systems, in shared values. That trust is why the city, for all its messiness, remains one of the most elegantly organized places on Earth. This city is proof that design doesn't always come from architects. Sometimes it comes from millions of small decisions made over hundreds of years. And maybe that's why Tokyo feels alive in a way perfectly planned cities never do. It's not sterile or predictable. It's constantly changing like a living organism adjusting to survive. But in Tokyo, chaos is the plan. If Tokyo is chaos made efficient, Venice is impossible. It's hard to imagine that one of the world's most iconic cities wasn't designed at all, but simply happened. When refugees fled mainland Italy during the fall of the Roman Empire, they sought safety in the swampy lagoons of the Adriatic Sea. They didn't come with city plans or blueprints, they just needed to survive. So they built huts on wooden platforms driven into mud, connecting them with planks and boats. Over centuries, that desperate improvisation turned into Venice, a floating maze of canals, bridges, and piazzas. A city with no cars, no streets, and no modern foundation. By all logic, it shouldn't exist. And yet, for more than 1,500 years, it's not only survived, but thrived. Venice became one of the wealthiest and most powerful trading hubs in history, precisely because of its unplanned structure. The canals that seem chaotic today were once perfectly suited for medieval commerce. Goods could move directly by boat from ship to warehouse. No traffic jams, no dust, no noise, just water. Every alleyway, every hidden courtyard evolved from centuries of adaptation. Buildings rose where the ground held firm. Canals deepened where boats passed most. And because there was no central planner, Venice formed as a self-organizing system, a place shaped by its geography and its people, not by theory. But what's most fascinating is how this ancient unplanned design still functions in the modern world. Venice remains a fully operational city with schools, markets, and residents, despite rising tides, mass tourism, and climate threats. It still runs without cars, and that creates something rare today: human-scale living. In Venice, your commute is a walk or a boat ride. Your neighborhood isn't divided by 6-lane roads, but connected by bridges. You can stand in one square and hear conversations echo across the water. There's intimacy here, something most smart cities have lost. And the city's design, or rather its lack of design, is what makes it excellent. When floods come, Venetians adapt, and their ancestors did the same for 1,000 years. It's a city built not on perfection, but on persistence. The unplanned layout even influences the psychology of being there. You can't navigate Venice the same way you would a grid city. GPS fails, signs mislead, and before you know it, you're lost, but in the best way possible. Every turn reveals a hidden bridge, a quiet cafe, or a sudden open square. It's a city that forces you to wander, to discover, to slow down. Venice reminds us that not everything functional needs to be efficient. Sometimes it just needs to work for humans. In a world obsessed with smart planning and digital precision, Venice stands as an ancient rebellion. So, from the ashes of necessity came a city that shouldn't exist, and yet became one of civilization's greatest achievements. Tokyo and Venice might seem like opposites, one a hypermodern megacity of steel and light, the other a decaying fairy tale built on water, but they share a hidden DNA. Both were never meant to be what they are, and both prove that unplanned doesn't mean unworkable. If you could peel back the streets of Istanbul, it would be like slicing through the layers of a time machine. Every stone, every column, every archway tells a story of constant transformation. Few cities have been as repeatedly conquered, rebuilt, and reborn as Istanbul. It began as Byzantium, a Greek colony. Then it became Constantinople, the glittering capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Later, it evolved into the heart of the Ottoman Empire. And today, it's Istanbul, a megacity of over 15 million people straddling 2 continents. You would expect that after so many transitions, the city would be a chaotic mess. And in some ways, it is. But in that chaos lies an extraordinary kind of harmony. Unlike planned cities like Brasilia or Washington, D.C., Istanbul was layered over centuries. Temples became churches, churches became mosques, palaces became museums, and streets bent around ruins that no one dared to remove. The result is a living palimpsest, a city where every era still breathes beneath the next. Walk through the Sultan Ahmet district and you'll see it in real time. The Hagia Sophia, once a Byzantine cathedral, now stands as a mosque again. This single building carries over 1,400 years of history. A few meters away, Roman cisterns hide beneath cafes. Tram lines cut through Ottoman-era markets. It shouldn't work, but somehow it does. And maybe that's Istanbul's secret. It never erased its past. Where most modern cities try to reinvent themselves, Istanbul absorbs its contradictions. Old and new coexist not out of design, but out of necessity. That's why the city feels alive, because it's constantly negotiating with itself. This unplanned layering also created one of the most adaptable urban fabrics on Earth. The streets aren't straight, but they followed the terrain, the shoreline, the remnants of ancient walls. Instead of erasing mistakes, Istanbul built around them. That gave rise to a network of winding alleys, bazaars, and stairways that somehow link into a functioning whole. For centuries, empires poured into the city, each leaving a mark, but never a master plan. And yet, this lack of control produced a structure that can absorb change. Earthquake? Fire? New empire? The city adjusts. Today, Istanbul stretches across both Europe and Asia, connected by bridges and ferries over the Bosphorus. That geography alone should make it chaotic, but instead, it became an advantage. The ferry system works like public transport. Locals commute across continents daily as if it were a bus ride. The chaos, once again, organizes itself. And here's what's fascinating. Studies of Istanbul's street network show that it's actually efficient by accident. Without ever being designed for it, its irregular layout creates multiple paths and redundancies, so if one route is blocked, others absorb the flow. Planned grid cities can't do that. When one road closes, the system collapses. Even Istanbul's informal housing follows a strange human logic. Communities build upward over time, one level at a time, as families grow. It's incremental, flexible, and personal. Not perfect, but deeply functional. So, while other cities try to impose order through blueprints and bureaucracy, Istanbul thrives on what can only be called structured spontaneity. Istanbul's story is messy, beautiful, and never finished. And maybe that's why, when you stand on the Galata Bridge and watch the skyline, it looks alive. If Tokyo is organized chaos and Venice is accidental beauty, then Lagos is something else entirely. Chaos that thrives anyway. On paper, Lagos should not work. It's a city that grew faster than any planner could control. From a fishing village of a few thousand in the 1800s, it exploded into a metropolis of over 20 million people today. No grand city grid, no perfect transport network, just relentless growth. And yet, Lagos functions. The thing about Lagos is that it represents what happens when a city grows faster than its government. With limited infrastructure and almost no master plan, people took urbanization into their own hands. They built houses wherever they could. Markets emerged where trade happened naturally. Roads appeared because someone needed to get somewhere. It's city making as a survival instinct. That might sound like a failure, but it's actually an astonishing example of bottom-up design. In Lagos, people create the systems. There's an informal economy so vast it powers over 60% of the city's workforce. If public transport can't keep up, residents invent their own motorcycles, minibuses, and tricycles. If formal housing lags behind, informal settlements fill the gap. It's urban evolution in real time, and even though much of it happens outside regulation, it works with a strange efficiency born from necessity. Markets like Balogun and Computer Village operate on trust networks stronger than some corporations. Informal bus stops adapt daily to changing commuter flows. In many ways, Lagos is self-correcting. Take Makako, the famous floating community on the lagoon. It's often portrayed as a symbol of poverty, but look closer and you'll see innovation. Houses on stilts, schools that float, canoes as taxis. It's not chaos, it's creativity born from constraint. Lagos is proof that urban order doesn't have to mean uniformity. Its disorder actually reflects adaptation, where people are constantly reshaping the city to meet their needs faster than bureaucracy ever could. Of course, Lagos has its struggle with traffic, inequality, and flooding. But even those challenges are being met in the same unplanned collective spirit. Tech startups, neighborhood associations, and even street vendors work together to solve problems from the ground up. It's a paradoxical success. The city that shouldn't work keeps reinventing itself until it does. And perhaps most fascinating of all is how Lagos's informal systems often outperform formal ones. Need electricity? There's a local generator network. Need food delivery? Thousands of small vendors already cover every corner. Need a loan? Microcredit groups operate entirely by word-of-mouth trust. Lagos is human resilience, turned into urban form. Its layout doesn't follow symmetry or design logic, it follows human needs. Roads twist around swamps, houses cluster near jobs, entire districts form out of trade routes, not city plans. It's a living, breathing demonstration that cities grow where life demands them to. Urban planners studying Lagos are beginning to realize something powerful. While it may not be traditionally designed, it's incredibly adaptive. Its distributed informal systems are surprisingly robust against shocks. During the COVID lockdown, when many global cities froze, Lagos's decentralized economy found ways to keep going. Because Lagos was never built to depend on perfection, it was built to survive imperfection. That's what makes it one of the most important cities in the world to watch. It challenges the Western notion that order equals success. It says maybe the real measure of a city isn't how neatly it's designed, but how well it responds to life's messiness. In a world of climate uncertainty, mass migration, and economic inequality, Lagos might just be a blueprint for the future with a messy, improvised, chaotic blueprint that works. So, what do Tokyo, Venice, Istanbul, and Lagos have in common? None were designed to be perfect, yet each, in its own way, works better than perfection ever could. In the long run, the best cities grow like forests, not factories. They adapt, evolve, and rebuild themselves through human will. Maybe that's the real lesson of unplanned cities, that order can emerge from imperfection. When people shape their surroundings through daily choices rather than distant decrees, cities become reflections of real life.